Welcome to That Little Podcast, episode 17. This week we're talking about nostalgia goggles and how they affect your perception on new, old, and remake materials, the things that you read, watch, and consume. We hope you enjoy, and let's start the conversation. I know that nostalgia is one of those big things that kind of we gravitate to now, especially in our day and age, especially right now with the pandemic. It's easier to live in familiar areas and things than, try to do something new, because right now everything's kind of unpredictable. So you may want to collect something that you used to collect as a kid, or rekindle those flames that you had back then. Hang out with friends, because you don't get to do that anymore right now. No, but I was talking with Andrew because of like the decisions made for G.I. Joe right now. Of course, I grew up reading the comics, watching the cartoon, playing with the toys. I know what the history is, and it just feels like doing the movie that they're doing right now. It doesn't feel G.I. Joe-ish. It feels like Fast and the Furious with ninjas.
The Storm Shadow movie?
The Snake Eyes one, yeah.
Snake Eyes, that's what I meant. Yeah.
And then for one, it's like G.I. Joe in the comics and stuff in the cartoon growing up, and most of the source material other than like the two movies, the new movies, not the original 86 or 87 movie.
Right, the live action stuff.
Yeah.
Resolute's great.
Oh yeah. Well, in those movies, and it seems like this one, it's more of an international G.I. Joe group instead of being real American heroes, like people that were Rangers or Special Forces or Green Berets, people that were excelled outside of what their standard militaries were, and so, or the standard military group they were in. So, like Gung Ho being a Marine, and Flint was obviously a Green Beret. Torpedo was a Navy SEAL. The stuff like that. They were all American. And then they did bring in international characters later on in the books and stuff. But, with what they're doing with this new movie, it's like Snake Eyes origin, G.I. Joe origins and stuff. And so it's like you're creating a new character. So he's not American anymore. He talks British. Of course, they picked an actor who is British Malaysian, which is not what Snake Eyes originally was. So it's like it's kind of jarring with my nostalgia being there for what I know what the source material is for what they're trying to do with these characters. It's kind of like I feel that it's going to be hard for me to watch.
Right.
But I realized that what Andrew was bringing up, and I know only want to say this too, is the fact that it's not meant for me. It's meant for the new audience. But it's like when you don't really have a toy line out right now you do, but it's not as what it used to be. Who are you catering to? Because there's not enough of the toy to go around for kids like my son or, someone older to be able to get these things. What's more for the collectors? So why aren't you making the movie for the collectors?
Because if they're able to make the movie right and the movie's a hit,
mm-hmm.
then the merch comes, right? Because it's like, okay, why are we going to spend all this money on the merch up front? We'll do just enough to kind of bring people towards us, and if the movie does great, then we'll start flooding the market with
mm-hmm.
This new Snake Eyes and all that stuff, right? That's because I don't pay enough attention to the toy side of all this, which is for the longest time while I'm like, why the hell are y'all canceling Young Justice and Green Lantern the animated series? Oh, it's because the merch isn't selling great. Never mind the fact that the shows were great, but the merch is not moving. So cut that crap. The kids obviously don't like it. It's like, no, please stop. It's a good show. What are y'all doing? No. And then off it goes.
That is a huge problem. But what I wanted to kind of add on to what Vince said, in that. So let's wait and see what the movie actually ends up looking like before we give it too much crap. Back when X-Men was first coming out, everybody hated Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, but now Hugh Jackman is Wolverine forever.
Yeah.
Or
you
Heath
know,
Ledger,
nobody gave it a
right?
chance. Sorry, David. Nobody really
No,
gave it a chance until that last trailer came out, and then everybody. I was on board at that point, at least. And he did a great job the entire time.
Well, yeah,
So
it's funny because you know, you think about, even though those movies really aren't Batman in a way, but the Christian Bale Batman movies, you know, a lot of people when I worked at Best Buy would come in, the guys I talked to on a regular basis who would buy stuff and I'd help them out with like finding things they want. They'd be like, you know, I can't see Christian Bale playing Bruce Wayne or Batman. And I was like, well, did you see Equilibrium? You know, he could play this really type character, but you know, it's the same thing with Michael Keaton with Batman for the
mhm.
'89 movie. You know, you had Mr. Mom and all of his other comedies, and it was like, I can't remember the movie, and my dad would be able to pop it off real quickly. That really showed that he could be on that level that Bruce
Clean
Wayne
and sober.
needed to be.
well,
Um,
and the
I
thing,
think you're talking about Clean and Sober,
yeah,
Vince.
that's it.
Sorry, David. Go ahead, please. You're
that's
next.
fine. I was gonna say no. Like I never heard anybody talking about Bruce Wayne. I remembered all of the uproar was around Heath Ledger's the Joker, right? Because it was kind of the same deal with like what you're describing with Keaton. He's coming off of all these rom-coms and all this stuff, and all of a sudden it's like this guy's gonna be the Joker. Knight's Tale dude's gonna be the Joker. And then those first couple images started floating out, and everybody's like, you know, he doesn't look too bad. And then and now he's, you know, one of the iconic Joker performances, right?
Right.
Arguably the iconic Joker performance outside of Mark Hamill, but that's beside the point.
Well, because at that time we had what, Mark Hamill and Jack Nicholson and Cesar Romero as the Joker, and that was the only instances we knew besides the comic. So, you had a character that came off of Brokeback Mountain, and like you said, and in what was it, A Knight's Tale, and a couple other movies. It was like it was hard to see him portray a character, and we needed to see it. But it's funny though, because you think about movies that, like Mortal Kombat, and I know we'll do a review on this, but it's like you look at the first movie, the original movie, it was more true to form with what the source material was than the new one. I had a problem with the fact that there was no Mortal Kombat in a Mortal Kombat movie. I felt like Ian Malcolm asking John Hammond if there was going to be dinosaurs on his dinosaur tour. But it's, I enjoyed the movie, but we'll go into that when we actually do this.
Yeah, and like to back to Andrew's comment, he's not here to expand on it or anything, but it's one thing to want to bring in a new audience, but at the same time, you're slapping the Snake Eyes name on it, right? You're slapping the G.I. Joe brand on it.
Yeah, you're slapping like 30
and
years.
So are you going to be completely changing the comics, right? Are you going to be going are you going to be going throughout the entire medium and stripping it out of this? It's like, it's one thing for characters that are built to be legacy characters. Like my best point of reference is always going to be Green Lantern, right? So for years, everyone's point of contact and point of reference for Green Lantern was the animated series, right? So whenever the Green Lantern movie came out, everybody's like, who's this jabroni, right? Like, where's John Stewart? John Stewart's Green Lantern, not this guy.
Right.
It's like, no, but Hal's always been there, right? So it's like, for characters that don't have that, it's that dichotomy that people have an issue dealing with, where you've got a character that is established, that it's that whole thing of like, Bruce Wayne doesn't exist. It's just a facet of Batman, right? So it's like, to go and replace Batman and then just say it's somebody else, it's not Bruce Wayne. It's kind of awkward. Whereas there's other characters that are generational heroes that can make that transition. Now, can that never be done? No, obviously it can be, right? Every character, every hero just about is always passed on the mantle to someone else, but it's not acknowledging the original, right? If this was a story of a new Snake Eyes, that still paid reference to the old, like if this was OG Snake Eyes passing on his skills and his mantle and all that to someone new, right? That's paying your respects to the original, and it's ushering in the new new blood, so to speak, right? And it's like that's where it's just such a hard balance to find, really, with storytelling in general, of how to hit those beats, how to not make it just be the same cliche, oh, hey kid, here's my sword, go off there and fight crime, and I'm gonna hang out here in the back and be that little voice in your ear guiding you around kind of deal, right?
Well, and I think some of this is the fault of the. It depends on what you're talking about. If you're referring to comic books or comic book cartoons, is what I meant. Things that we know have a history for them. Transformers, as an example. Part of the problem is that some of these things haven't been updated for the new audience, right? Batman should have aged out by now. The new people should have new characters so that they can follow them. And not that I don't want to take away from the nostalgia, from the iconicness of Batman and Superman and Captain America and all these people, but when you are not presenting new content from the base material to new people, and you're still going with the same thing that you were doing for 30 years or however long these guys have been out there, you don't give the new people the opportunity to have their own heroes, I guess, is kind of where I'm getting at.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
so you have to balance from a creator's perspective. You've got to balance keeping the nostalgia going for the old fans, but then also enticing new people into the medium. And I think that a lot of what's going on right now is they're trying to, instead of utilizing the entry point of comic books, they're trying to make the movies entry points into these other mediums to try and hype sales for those. And it's just not working as well as they want it to. So what we end up with is old fans upset by the new movies, and newer people can look at it from a different perspective. I don't have that nostalgia for that character. I'd like to see what's going on, but then if the movie's crap, the movie's just crap. If the writing's bad, the acting's bad, there's nothing you can really do about that from a fan perspective. But from a decent movie, it's really hard to strike that balance, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. So that you had the older generation that started with Barry Allen, right? That was their Flash, and he died, right? That was the end of Barry Allen for years. So long, in fact, that my brother ended up Wally West is his Flash, right? That was his introduction into the character. That's who it was, and Wally was the only Flash in the comics for so long, outside of Bart and all them, but primary Flash was Wally for so long that it really felt like even the older crowd finally grew into that character, right? So even though they brought Barry back and it was this big moment and everybody had a good time with it, it's like you still had that transition to a new character. Now it feels like, I don't know if it's because the markets have fallen off and they're just trying to get everybody back into reading, that they're like, okay, we need to drag everybody from history back, and we got to have every single one of these characters so every generation has their version, instead of really pushing that moving, right? Because that's what we had in the 90s going into the 2000s. You had all of these transitional characters, all these moments where they were trying to transition to the new generation,
right?
And then they just ran back to what they knew. So absolutely,
right.
Yeah,
it's the biggest thing too is you think about, Mark brought up Transformers and stuff, and if you remember the original cartoon, up until the movie, Prime was the leader, Megatron and everything, and then the movie changed everything. Prime died, Megatron became Galvatron. There was a lot of Autobots that died. Of course, it was an easy way for them to discontinue some of the toys and stuff, but it was still good storytelling. I mean, even though some of the stuff was kind of wonky a little bit, but Hot Rod became Rodimus Prime, and he became the leader, and he was kind of a leader that was like the mantle was thrust upon him, and he always always looking to the statue of Optimus Prime for help, because he never felt he could fill out the shoes. So of course you had really good storytelling about him being that uncertain leader, and it's funny too, because you look at another one of the movies that I felt was just a horrible adaptation was Michael Bay's Transformers, because the decisions to make the Transformers look like they did, in a practical standpoint, it was jarring. So you're obviously alienating your audience by making them transform the way they do, having them just kind of morph and everything just has a fold into a plate,
Spin, yeah.
instead of actually just showing the transformation, a real because there was really good test footage that people can go look up on YouTube about what was going on when they were trying to see what would work for the movie. And there were some really good test images of like an Ultra Magnus, like a Mack truck transforming into an Optimus Prime type figure. They even tried to use the Transformer alternator figures, which were more modern cars that, you know, the cars that you would buy that had that where you could open up the engine and the hood and the doors and everything, and they would transform realistically. You know, and but the biggest thing is like the character representation in that, how they represented the original source material and the characters, because
Right.
Prime would have never like griped at Spike, even though it was Sam and the Sam Witwicky in the movie, about hurry up. The whole like them running around. There was moments in it that was like it was almost made for too kiddie, like
Right.
Bumblebee popping off his little thing on his crotch and then spilling oil on the service agent. Bumblebee was
or them hiding around the house, like they're
Yeah.
going to be able to hide. They're giant robots.
They
Really,
could just be cars parked on the street. There could have been a party at the house somewhere. They didn't need to be. And in the fact that like Jazz getting killed and ripped apart, that should have been Ironhide. Ironhide was the one who was like, "I'm ready. Let's go. I'm the gung ho." He should have been the one ripped apart and having
Right.
Jazz survive. The fact that like when Megatron's on top of the building telling Sam to hand him the cube, "Give me the cube, boy." If this was real Megatron from the comics or the cartoon, he would have crushed Sam and took it from his mutilated corpse. I'm sorry, I don't want to get into like the whole thing, but it was like when you take a stuff and you totally like alien. It was cool getting to see Optimus Prime on TV. I mean, you know, on the big screen and everything. But I felt that it was better with what they did with the Bumblebee movie. I felt that they were a little bit more true to the source material. I felt that. I still thought it was dumb that they decided to make him Bumblebee mute the heart of the Transformers. You know, it's funny too in the comics, not the original Marvel one, but like the Dreamwave, and I think it was the IDW books. Bumblebee became the leader. He went through, you know, being this whole like espionage bot or you know, infiltrator that could go in and do these things, and then like Prime's like best friend. And then became the leader when Prime died. There was this growth and transition of characters. It's like the same thing when Batman died. When
we didn't die at his Batman.
No, the Omega Beam killed him and stuff.
You're talking about the newer one.
Yeah, and then you know, Dick Grayson took the mantle up of being Batman. You know, but Dick had become Nightwing. He became his own man. He didn't need to become Batman again. You know, that mantle could have been passed to, you know, not Jason Todd, but Tim Drake. Yeah, it could have been passed to Drake, because at the time, Damian Wayne wasn't old enough to be Batman, and he hadn't had that life lessons to become to know what he needed to do. Because at that point, he would have been just like Azrael, killing people when he took up the manual of being Batman after Batman.
Right. This is kind of where that nostalgia thing kicks in, is that Dick Grayson is next in line to become Batman.
Yes.
Period.
Yes.
I don't care who he is. I know for a fact, or in my belief, Dick Grayson, no matter what, feels like there needs to be a Batman always.
Yes, he would take that mantle regardless, even if it's needed. Yeah.
Right.
We'll do that.
So that kind of goes with the nostalgia thing. Like, that's what I feel. But obviously, you're a little bit younger than me, so you feel differently about it. And I do understand that, like you said, Dick Grayson's become his own man. He's Nightwing. That's him now. But I still just think that if Batman was really to die like he did, Dick Grayson wouldn't hesitate to take up Batman as the mantle.
And see, that's the sad thing too, is that we don't get stories now where we have a transition. We don't have, like, you know, Green Lantern was doing that for a little bit. You know, we had Guy Gardner and then John Stewart and Kyle Rayner and Simon Bass.
Again, Green Lantern's a whole different monster, right?
We'll get into that too.
there's been transitions forever with that, but that's again, Green Lantern is built into the character more than I would probably say any other superhero that's out there. It is the very nature of the Green Lantern character to pass on to another. I mean, that's how he started, right?
Yeah.
Abin Sur dies, Lantern goes to Hal. So immediately you have, this just continually transitions. That's why I think it's ridiculous at this point that there's 7 Earth Lanterns. Yeah, it's some stupid amount. It's like, okay, guys, please stop just giving new rings to guys on Earth. They're supposed to be 1 per sector. You added the honor guard so you could keep like John and Kyle and all them, but like let's calm it down. So retire some people.
I haven't read Green Lantern in a really long time. Like I think the last time I read was when I think he was the one after Kyle is the one that I last read about.
Well, it circled back, right? It went from Kyle, then it circled back to Hal with Rebirth.
Right. But after that, like whoever the newest one after Kyle was, that's who.
Simon. That'd be Simon Baz.
Yeah. So they should have all just become Green Lanterns in different sectors. Like whichever lantern got past them the ring. And again, I don't know how exactly they got their rings, but yeah, I think they should have just ended up going to different sectors. That should have been their assignment, you know?
And yeah, or I mean, again, they've baked in stuff to be able to have each one doing their own thing, but but it goes back to again what I'm saying, where they don't want to retire anybody. They don't want to put Hal to bed. They don't want to. That was what was so sad about so Jeff Johns' run with Hal ended with like him getting married to Carol and riding off into the sunset. Like Hal was done, and then kind of like Supernatural season 6, like Dean was happy with a family, but hey guys, we got to churn out like 14 more seasons of this show. So Dean, you're ditching the family for stupid reasons, and you got to get back to monster hunting with your brother. It's like, wait, what just happened, guys?
Well, yeah, that's that whole thing too. It's funny. Yeah. So it's funny because you think about stories that should have a finite ending. It's going to get to the point where it's going to end, but the ratings are too good, and then you've got like the fans that want to keep whatever is going around, even though it may be physically impossible for it to happen, to continue to push on. With like I totally forgot what I was going to say about what the thing I had in my head, but it's like, of course, Green Lantern flashes like that with Barry Allen coming back, and then like all the flashes are together. Batman coming back. There's no growth. There's not allowed to be growth because you have new generation coming in. It's like they grew up with these characters and they want to tell their own story.
Right.
There's no like continuity about like, hey, this is where things are. We're going to continue where this is at, and just. But I guess that's that whole thing when you have this giant multiverse of things, and sometimes you want to go back and retell the story.
Right.
Especially like with the New 52, where they went back and started retelling some of the old stuff, or they were doing the whole thing of, Batman was only Batman for 5 years, and it's like that's not possible if he had all the other wards with him.
Yeah, that was awkward because they pick and chose what continuity they wanted to keep and what they wanted to strip. I mean, it's funny because like honestly, if I had to think about it right now, if we're just talking about comics, Marvel's probably been doing the closest to actually passing on mantles, right? I'm not up to speed with everything that they're at right now, like Miss Marvel running around, but it's not Carol, right? Carol is, I don't even know if there's Miss Marvel, which is not Mr. Fantastic Girl, and then you've got Carol as Captain Marvel now, and then I don't know if Falcon is still running around as Cap, and then Cap.
I don't know anything about what's going on. I just know that like you have an opportunity to have people grow, and one of my dad's biggest arguments, not mine, but was like Franklin Richards or any of the kids in the Marvel universe of, it's like, yeah, of course we got Cable, who's Cyclops and
Jean.
Yeah, Jean's child. But, of course, the only way you have him grow up is because he's in an alternate universe for one, and he comes back to the past to change something.
Right.
Yeah. Where's our Kid Cable stories?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is too is that now that they're trying to make new heroes, it's more pandering. It's diversity for diversity's sake, or it's a social commentary on certain things that are going on in the real world. It's like, but it's not the real what's really going on. It's like, oh, we're going to make it hip. It's about being hip about what you're doing instead of like, how about somebody that's dealing with stuff that's going on right now currently, and them having to tread that line of like, look, I'm trying to be a hero, and I really want to do things because this is affecting me in a
Negative
manner
way.
because of like the color of my skin or whatever, and I want to do something, but I can't do that because then I'm just like the bad guys. It's like Batman with the fact that he never wanted to kill anybody or he would be just like the Joker or the villains he was putting away.
Well, and I think part of the problem is that they stick too much with the established characters. They don't retire them like we've talked about. But they introduce. I mean, introducing new characters is always going to be hit or miss. You introduce a new character, people like them. You introduce another guy, they don't like him, you retire that person and move on to somebody else. You just keep going until people grab onto the new characters, and then start retiring some of the old people so that we don't have this need for this nostalgia. You can keep the old characters the way they are. The only thing that I have to say about, the other thing that I have to say about that is, if you really look at what you would want to do, moving those characters from one medium to another, you would want to start from scratch. You would want to introduce, for example, Barry Allen as the Flash, and then progress through the movies like Marvel did with Captain America. He retired, he gave the shield to Sam, and Sam eventually decided to become Captain America Falcon.
Yeah.
And I mean, at the end of the day, it just boils down to, it's just got to be good stories, right? I mean, that's where, there was so much Barry to Wally transition, because Barry had this epic send-off at the end of Infinite Crisis, right?
Right.
Hal transitioned to Kyle was a lot rougher because Hal went crazy psychopath and murders the core. And so everyone hated Kyle for years and years and years, but they just it was like at that time where I guess things were good enough where they just said, we can weather this storm. We're just going to stick through it. Right.
And they did.
They did. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's like what we said, right? Now, some people, Kyle is their Lantern, right? And it's just, and it's kind of like we said, right? It's, if it's that bad and absolutely no one is, continuing to read the books, even if it's hate reading the books, right? As long as it's hate reading or hate watching or whatever, you still got eyes on it. Right. And if you're telling good stories, telling good, consistent stories, then eventually you will win that audience over. But everything's got to be right now, right? Everything's got to be a hit now. Everything's got to make it the first season. If you're not hitting all those ratings on episode 5, at the mid-season, we're cutting you off, wrap it up, mothballing it, we're moving on to the next thing. It's like nothing has the chance to really breathe anymore.
Well,
right? Marvel got lucky, but
yeah, they did. I do have to, as an argument for the opposite side here, the everything's about money. Yes. They don't do any of this for out of the goodness of their heart.
No, it's whatever audience they can bring in that's going to help them sell the book, because right now,
or the movie or whatever it is. Yes.
Right. Right now, us dealing with the pandemic, whether people like it or not, everybody hates it, but we're all dealing with it in our own way. And the fact that a lot of people aren't spending money on certain things, so industry's hurting on everything. So it's like, well, if I can do this, that's gonna maybe, unfortunately, for lack of a better term, be for somebody else or pander to a certain type of group. It may alienate, the old fans or certain new fans, But it's the same thing with like going back to what we were talking about with Snake Eyes, choosing to like make him an Asian character kind of like goes against what the character was. Because Snake Eyes, I mean, Storm Shadow is the Asian character. He's Japanese. His family's from Japan. They have a ninja clan, the Rashikage clan, and him, Stalker, and Snake Eyes were in Vietnam. Now you can tell a story, pick any of the wars right now, and still do the same thing that you did with that character. You're just changing the theme and location. But
Right.
it doesn't look like he has any kind of military background.
Sorry, go ahead and finish your thought.
You're taking away what the tragedy of the character is.
Right.
Because
so,
yeah, go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
I was gonna turn this over to Joker. The new movie Joker. I liked it as a story, but that was not Joker.
No,
that was an insane guy, and that was all. Who decided to dress up like a clown and call himself the Joker. Mm-hmm. That wasn't the Joker, but you could have easily turned that movie into the real Joker simply by having him go nuts and go to Ace Chemical and Batman fights him. You could have had a quick scene with Ben Affleck in there fighting the Joker. He gets knocked into the vat, and now he's the Joker. Really simple.
The thing too is that the fact that, like, I don't know why I always think of the Killing Joke as the definitive origin for the Joker. A down and out comedian who's struggling with his family. He can't make ends meet, and just like he gets wrapped into the wrong crowd, and just things go bad. He's like, everything goes bad in his life, and then he happens to pull that stunt off at the Ace Chemical plant, and then gets freaking dropped into the vat because Batman thinks he's a bad guy, doesn't know any better, creates his own arch nemesis.
Right.
You don't have to like do this whole like we're gonna deconstruct the character and then try to make it cool and edgy. It's like, sometimes it's tragedy. Some people, I don't know if it's just we don't want to stick to what was originally told because it was just done really well. The translating something that should deserve a special treatment to a film or an animated version that would do well. But some people, they just want to do their own thing. They want to have their own mark on it, and sometimes that could be good and sometimes it can be bad.
Right. And I think that the writer and the director and the crew and everybody that went behind Joker, that was behind Joker, I mean, they had a really valid point. Mental health is a huge issue, and it's good that they put that on the forefront in this movie. I just think that they didn't make the character. There's a lot of things that I think that the Joker would have been doing that this character in Joker didn't do. Mm-hmm. He incited a lot of riots, but he didn't really do a lot himself. Yeah, he killed a couple of people, but the Joker that I know would have been in the middle of all of the stuff that went on in that. He wouldn't have just been behind the scenes inciting people. He would have been in there doing stuff as well.
Yeah, and something to add to that too is like, I don't understand why it can't be just a normal person having a mental break. They snap. It's always got to be some reason why the character's like this. But it's like we don't live in a day and age where what could be realistically what the snap isn't actually the reason why he's like that. So he has a mental illness now. He lives with his mom who's on his nerves. It's like, okay, we're giving him the symptoms from like, a lot of books that have these people that are problems just snap instead of like, the tragedy of being a person in society and having to deal with life and things just going wrong and you losing everything and you just snap.
Well, that's kind of what the character was, in my opinion, though.
Yes, yeah.
He was down and out. His life didn't go the way that he expected it to go. People kept he had this illness, which I don't know if the whole laughing thing was a little bizarre to me, that he just had. Is that even a real issue? I'm not sure, so I can't really talk about it a lot. But I mean, it was weird, definitely. And if it is real, then I'm glad they played up on it.
Yeah.
But if it's just a made up syndrome, then I don't think it did the character any good whatsoever. But he had people picking on him. That's fine. Those people do snap at some point. I think that was perfect, but I do think that he should have been in the middle of stuff a lot more than he was. And I think that they should have had a quick 30-second scene of Ace Chemical and Batman knocking him in. And that would have been, 30, it would have been what, 5 minutes changed in the movie that they did. And then
they could at least done a deleted ending or an unused ending, alternate ending. I think the thing that was jarring for me about the movie was the fact that I just had read, I read it when it came out, but the Stephen King's book, Mr. Mercedes. And, the character of Brady Hartsfield, he lives with his mom, who's like crazy, and he's crazy. He's been doing these things to like kill people, and he's psychotic. And it's like, I felt that like the archetype for that character was Brady more than it was the Joker, because how crazy that character is, what he does trying to versus what they did in the movie, the TV show adaptation versus the book. He tries to actually kill a bunch of people in a concert, and that they try to stop. And it's like 50,000 people at this concert for this big event, and not just we're having a cultural event and people are going to sing and stuff like that, maybe a neighborhood thing. But I enjoyed the adaptation of it, and I'm not but I really loved the book, and it was really good. And actually, I love that whole Bill Hodges trilogy that he did with that whole stuff. That was really good. And I recommend it to anybody. If Finders Keepers and End of Watch is the other two books in that set. Really good. But go ahead.
Well, I was going to jump in real quick. So this is kind of making me think, going back to thinking about all these different points, right? It really boils down to, the root of nostalgia is those touchstones that everybody has in their lives, right? That's where it's generated from. What was your first introduction to this? What was your first introduction to that? And it reminds me of an article I read, God, it was years ago. I don't remember who it was that posted it up, that was talking about how in science fiction canon, right, has kind of changed in its meaning. And what they were talking about was, once upon a time, whenever you go to science fiction conventions and all this, and you talk to people there, everyone had read Heinlein, right? Everyone had read Asimov. Everyone had read Bradbury. And there was this core of knowledge that everyone had, that maybe you hadn't read every story Bradbury read or wrote, but you had read Something Wicked This Way Comes, or maybe you hadn't read every little story of Asimov, but maybe you had read what is it, the Nightland, where is he the one who wrote Nightland?
I don't know.
Where it's anyways, or iRobot or something like that, or Heinlein, you might not have read Starship Troopers, but you read The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, like that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because that article was arguing that people don't have that anymore, right? Because the genre has expanded so much, because now we have the internet and all this interconnectivity, and now you have all of these people that have written all these things, and there's just such a flood of information that's out there. You have people whose only experience is in one lane, right, of this road. And so it kind of goes back to what we were talking about of it. It's hard to try and get that lane to cross over into other lanes to try and pick up all these other audiences with just, your one vehicle, right? You're trying to expand one vehicle out to catch all lanes, but
right.
It's hard. It's difficult to do that without, irritating and.
Oh, it froze.
He's still talking.
You really just have to make your peace with the fact that, look, not everybody is going to like Man of Steel. Not everybody is going to like Joaquin Phoenix's version of the Joker. Not everybody is going to be on board with Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man or Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, or the fact that he's got organic web shooters compared to mechanical web shooters that he built and all that. It's just, and that's kind of where, the more I've thought about this topic, there's a lot of stuff nostalgia wise that I know I enjoy, but I try and be open-minded enough to the things that are coming, as long as it's not just blatant betrayals of the characters, right? Like with the whole, well, go ahead, but yeah, just and that definition of betrayal of character, I guess, is different for everybody.
Yeah.
Some people feel like Tobey Maguire was a betrayal of Spider-Man because of the web shooters, and other people feel, that this other thing about some other minute piece of some other character was a betrayal, and it's like,
yeah, some people don't like Tom Holland as a Spider-Man.
Well, they're dumb. I'm just gonna say it.
Yeah,
they're dumb. I was gonna say, nostalgia. Honestly, going into if you've got a fixed idea of what a particular story should be, going into a movie or a TV show or reading a new book or reading a new comic about those characters, you're just going to be disappointed. There's no way that nostalgia,
that preconceived notion. It's the preconceived notion. It's the you're already going into it at a mindset that you're not going to like it, or you have a set like guideline, and if it deviates from what you're experiencing, you're not going to like it.
Like going back to David's point about the Spider-Man and the organic web shooters, I hated that idea so much.
Because the only person who had that was Miguel O'Hara.
Right, exactly. So going into that movie, I automatically hated it for that reason. But when I walked out of the theater, I loved that Spider-Man movie. Now, conversely, I can't stand to watch it now. I hate Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst's chemistry in those movies. It is so horrible. And Spider-Man 3, I don't even know what they did with Spider-Man 3. That was ridiculous.
I'm gonna blame Universal and Sony at the time. I think
that was just crazy.
Yeah.
If you really want to get totally nostalgic about it, even the Tom Holland Spider-Man's not right, because the MCU, you can't count that as canon at all. It's got its own canon at this point. All these characters have been introduced in different ways than they were introduced in the comics. I mean, who was Thor's alter ego in originally?
Come on. My dad would be saying it right now. He's probably saying he's going to put it in the comments right now. Shit.
Anyways,
I'll remember in a minute. Hopefully,
was his last name Blake?
Yeah. I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah, look it up, Vince. Anyways, he's never been that character in the show, in the MCU stuff. He not a single time.
Yeah, he's always been Thor.
Say that again.
Oh.
I said he's always been Thor. Yeah, you're right.
Well, he only used that identity when he was stuck on Earth and couldn't get Mjolnir in the first movie, because that's what the name they gave him or whatever.
Right. But he didn't really act like that character. He didn't change forms. None of that stuff happened. He was Thor the entire series of MCU movies. And do people hate the movies because of that? I really doubt they even care about that part of it. But I've really learned to
Donald Blake.
Yeah. Excuse me. I've really learned to go into all of these movies without those nostalgia glasses on. I go into them to enjoy the movie.
Mm-hmm.
If I enjoy it, I enjoy it. If I don't, I don't, based on its own merits, not based on any history from any other source. I mean, even if you look at like
Hold on, Mark. Wait.
I've watched the first couple episodes.
Sweet Tooth.
Sweet Tooth.
Yeah.
I was asking if you guys watched it or not.
Not yet. I'm going to. I haven't had a chance yet.
I've seen
It's
the
a
first couple episodes.
it's a really, really good show, but there are quite a few things that are different than the comics, which I'm reading now. Honestly, the funny thing is I think I posted this someplace, but watching the TV show Sweet Tooth actually made me, because of where it ends in the series, made me want to go back and actually read the comics, because I want to know what happened now. I want to know what happened after that point. And when you read the comics, there's a lot of stuff in the show that just did not happen in the comic at all. Characters are different. That, they're just completely changed from what they originally were. And that goes back to I was going to say something else. I can't remember.
I do.
Anyways,
well, I'll hop in real
Jupiter's
quick
Legacy.
on that.
Like
Go, say again, Mark.
we were kind of talking about earlier about how they do one season of a show and then they just end it because of the ratings and it didn't do well. If you look at the two differences between like Jupiter's Legacy and Sweet Tooth, I would say both of those comic series are probably about as equal in fandom out there. They're both about equal, right? If you weighed the two fandoms, they probably weigh about equally. Maybe I'm wrong. I could totally be out of context here, but I felt that while Jupiter's Legacy was good, it was not great at all. It was a little slow going. It was kind of dark, which is fine, but I just don't think as many people got into it. I think that they expected way too much out of what they were doing for that series. I don't think the fandom that was out there for the comics really was really out there enough for people to support it properly.
Well, and I also think that, specifically with Jupiter's Legacy, right? Jupiter's Legacy, if you're a person who knows nothing of comics and you're just walking into it, and you've just seen 2 seasons of The Boys, and then you see them kind of pushing Jupiter's Legacy, you're like, oh, Netflix is just doing their own knockoff of The Boys,
which is to a certain extent true, right? Because
yeah, absolutely.
Jupiter's Legacy was just as ultra violent as The Boys. It's just as super violent as The Boys. I think the biggest difference is when The Boys was created, I think that they had better expectations of where this was going to go. So the budget for it was properly set up. I think that going into Jupiter's Legacy, they expected too much of it, too much out of the fandom out there, too much out of, word of mouth and things like that, to spend $200 million on the season. Maybe if they'd spent $100 million, they would have felt better about the ratings that they got for it or the viewership that they ended up getting for it. And then we'd have season 2 coming along. Instead, they're deciding to drop it and go with, a spin-off of it, a different.
Right.
So I wonder if, we weren't in the middle of what's going on right now, would the funding be there? Would the audience actually be there for it, or the fun, just the opportunity for it to extend, because right now there's a lot of people at home and they're binging everything,
right.
have more opportunity to do stuff. So it's kind of weird, you have a series that has great potential, especially since it has a comic from it that was popular. Why didn't it continue to flourish, or why wasn't it given the chance to flourish?
Well,
because they were expecting the numbers that The Boys garnered, right?
Exactly.
But much like the MCU, right? And the cinematic universe they created, they did it first, right? They hit the ground first with it. That concept that we're going to deconstruct the idea of the superhero. We're going to be hyper violent. This isn't going to be the Disney-fied version of superheroes that you're used to. Boys hit all that first. So Netflix thought, okay, we're going to tap that vein and it's immediately going to take off, but it wasn't the same. And so it was kind of a struggle to get to that.
So I got
and
2 points, but I'll wait. Let Mark finish quick.
sorry, as far as the boys go, like in my opinion, I think that, like, I haven't looked at numbers. So if either of you guys have looked at
No.
viewership numbers or anything like that for either of these two shows, please correct me. But I bet that the viewership for both of them was about the same. Maybe, just a little bit of a fluctuation there. I just think that Netflix spent too much money for the viewership that they got. They expected more than what the boys got. And I could be, again, David, I could be totally wrong. You could be right. The viewership for the boys could have been way higher. I'm not sure.
No, but I can see that for both. And then here's my thing. So I had two topics. I mean, 2 things on 2 points we've talked about previously. One, for this one, I'll bring up. Would it have been better had it been animated, either one of them, just like Invincible? And you think about like Spawn back in the day with on HBO with Keith David as Spawn and all that stuff. That did really well, and that at least went, I think, 3 seasons. Should have went more.
But Invincible's going for a different tone, right? Invincible is being very. Invincible is one of the is a great comic in the sense that it's hitting 2 tones at the same time, at least to me, right? It's hitting the old Silver Age, like truly earnest heroes going out there to do hero work, all that stuff, and then at the same time, you're getting the Garth Ennis boys level, bones snapping, blood spraying everywhere, horrific stuff going on. So it's this weird dichotomy of the two. You have this truly classic sense of hero mixed with the and that's what it's commentating on, right? It's commentating on the realism of the violence in that kind of a setting, whereas the boys and all these others are absolutely taking the piss out of superheroes, which is the point, right? That's
right.
From the very beginning. That's the jettison. So animating it, I don't think would have changed at all, because it's still the story that you're telling.
Right.
Could they have
honestly,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that the viewership, if they had animated Jupiter's Legacy, might have fit better for the cost that they spent, but I don't know if it would have been any better than it was. I think that animating it, probably they would have lost viewership for it, just because it was animated, and there's certain people out there, even though they're into comics and all this stuff, that just don't watch animated stuff, period.
In the same token, though, you have I'll say this and then I'll start the other point. But you look at like Castlevania, which is an adaptation of a video game, and they went 4 seasons. I mean, they're going to probably continue on with the legacy of the original game, because that's what they were planning to do anyway. But those did really well. Each season got, even though the first season was only 3 episodes, which is crazy.
But Castlevania is not pulling. But Castlevania is not pulling the superhero crowd, right?
Castlevania is not.
Castlevania is pulling the Resident Evil.
You're getting the gamers. You're getting the horror crowd. You're getting
right. And that's hitting all these beats. You've got Warren Ellis writing it, so you're also pulling some of the comic group, right? So yeah, you're pulling from a bunch of different areas. So Castlevania, as long as they nailed the animation and got the story right, and fit in the story beats that people wanted to see, it was going to be a hit, right? But that was Jupiter's Legacy. I didn't even know it existed, honestly, until I heard stuff about it. I knew what The Boys was, but that's again because The Boys kind of they did the whole hero deconstruction thing was done a long time ago by Alan Moore and all them in the 90s, right, or 80s. Yeah. Watchmen. But the Boys was one that took it to 11 back in the day. Right? So it had that infamy. And then on top of that, you could still market it because it was Ennis. You could say, yeah, it's the guy who did Preacher. It's all these other established shows that already had this backing of. So you already kind of had a little bit more of a built-in audience of people who were kind of used to, okay, this guy wrote this. All right, I might give this a shot kind of deal. But
it makes you wonder about what they're going to do with Sandman, when that
the Gaiman. Well, American Gods has been doing pretty well.
No, American Gods is dead. That's over.
Yeah, it's gonna.
Oh, that's right. It did die. It started off well, and
It's
then
good,
it fell
but
off.
yeah,
it
it's
really
not.
started off well. That third season was horrible, though, in my opinion.
My second point is going back to what we're talking about Marvel and how that Marvel decided to change things with the cinematic universe. And if you think about it, though, it's still stuck to somewhat of a known source.
Right.
Not that it was so jarring that it was like, it took people out of the experience, because you want people to go into a movie or a film or a TV show or whatever and not have their suspension of disbelief or their uncanny valley of what they're watching just pull them out of it, because you want them to be invested in it.
So kind of going now, I realize whenever Mark was talking a little bit earlier, there was a part I was going to try and jump in about, but it goes back to, again, what I was saying kind of earlier, where if you're going to do these transitions of heroes, right, at least acknowledge the original, and it feel that way there's that passing of the torch, which makes the moment that they come into that character all the more, right? Like if we just started off with Sam Wilson as Captain America, then you don't have those
Not the
great
explanation of why. Yes.
You don't have that friendship that he built up with Steve. You don't have them fighting together. You don't have those funny little moments in the Winter Soldier where on your left, all that stuff, right? And you don't have you were able to bring people in with Steve that grew up with Steve and all that, and then you got to see that transition to Sam, and that's how it could work, right? That took multiple movies, but for characters like Superman, right? Everyone knows Superman. You could start a movie off with Superman, and within the first act, Superman could be dead. He could be, in the Phantom Zone,
completely, where you couldn't do anything anymore.
You could hit him with golden kryptonite. He's lost all his powers, all that fun stuff, and then you establish the new character, right? It's you. It doesn't even have to be one of the Supermen from the main comics.
Henry Irons,
Icon and Rocket from the Milestone comics, and introduce them. They're established characters in Young Justice, right? You could have these characters that are known quantities and bring them in and show that transition of power, and that makes it so much more powerful to me.
Yeah, because you have an established character getting the spotlight that they need. I mean, I got this feeling that with No Way Home that we're going to get to see Miles Morales, but I think it's going to be the animated version in the movie. I don't know. I just got this feeling because we're already going to get Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire coming back to play Spider-Man.
That goes to all the other characters. I love Sam Wilson. I liked Falcon. I realized he wasn't in a lot of comics a lot of times. Like when I was actually reading comics, he was an ancillary character and not a main character. But every time he showed up, I enjoyed reading his adventures or his actions with whatever else was going on. I do wish that they would have presented him better and more often, and even obviously a series of his own when I was actually into comics, but it's what it is.
Well, I think that goes back again to what I was saying, where it's that torch passing, right? Because again, you have these characters that even like what you said, Vince, even outside of your own gender, race, whatever, there are certain characters that just they are so iconic. They transcend all of that. So how much more powerful is it for that original character to pass on that mantle in that moment, right? That's like Green Lantern's my favorite character because when I was a kid, I saw a Challenge of the Super Friends episode. Awkward and awful show. But there was a moment, I grew up watching tons of the old, like, what was it, the 40s and 50s Superman cartoons, all that stuff. Superman, in my mind, I didn't read the comics, but just Superman as a symbol was just such a great character. And then there was an episode where Wonder Woman, Black Lightning, and oh god, I can't remember who else was in it, but they got trapped in a little toy man world in a black hole, and Superman and Green Lantern went to go save them, went into the black hole was closing, they had a certain amount of time to get out. Superman couldn't get out of the black hole. kid me, my mind's blown. Superman can't do something? That's crazy. And then in walks this dude in green, and he's like, hey, I can use my ring to fuse us together. So suck it, Dragon Ball. I can fuse us together, and our combined powers can pull us out of this black hole. And that's what happened. Green Lantern fused with Superman. And so now all of a sudden in my little kid mind, hey, here's this character that's not Superman. But all of a sudden Green Lantern came up to the same level, right? It wasn't a passing of the torch, but it was showing that this character is just as competent, just as powerful wavelength. And it kind of goes back to this weird need again to tear down the old instead of giving it its place, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Or building it up. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's where it really needs to get to, of just, guys, you don't need to just completely destroy and do away with the legacy. You utilize that legacy and what it is in order to inform and prop up the new until it can find its own legs and move on.
Right. So two things. First, kind of along the same lines as what you were just talking about how you started liking Green Lantern. I just watched Shazam again, and in that there's a scene where Shazam is floating outside of this kid's window, and the kid's playing with a Batman and Superman action figure, and he looks up and he sees Shazam just kind of hanging in the air there, and he literally just drops those toys and is in awe of this guy, this new superhero that he's never seen before, floating right outside his window. So kind of along those same lines as what you were just saying. Yeah. And then what did you say there at the end? There was something.
Let me see if I can recall.
You were
the passing of the torch thing.
Yeah.
So Titans is a perfect, the
Yes.
HBO Max show Titans is a perfect example of that. We start off, the Titans have already been established. They've already been around for a little while. They quit. They're no longer together. Dick starts, they all start meeting these other people. Dick goes to get help from his old team members. And, season 2, kind of, they all come together. They're all in Titan's Tower. And it is kind of like that passing of the torch. I mean, don't get me wrong, all of the characters are nostalgic characters for Titans fans at this point, because it's Raven and it's all the characters that we know. But it's a very close example of what we're talking about right now. It's that older characters, Aqualad, who ended up dying, but Dick Grayson, Robin growing into Nightwing by the end of the second season, Donna Troy no longer wanting to be a superhero and passing that torch on to Raven or Starfire. Whether you love or hate that show for what it is, it really does represent kind of what we're talking about, and moving that nostalgia from one group of characters or one character onto another one, that we might equally enjoy, or we could hate that person, but we could hate that person based on the merits. We could obviously hate that person based on the poor writing choices, the poor design choices, whatever it is. But we could also just hate that character for who he is. Jason Todd was a dick. He's a dick in the show. He was a dick in the comics, but people liked him because he was a dick. People didn't like him because he wasn't the old Robin. He wasn't the nice kid that ran around. He was a street thug that Batman decided to take under his wing and try to train. And his actions and lifestyle led him to get killed by the Joker. And of course, he's a completely different character now. And while he still does take on some of the characteristics of the old...
Yeah. He's become more than what he was.
Right, exactly. He's grown a lot. So people who didn't like him when he was Robin, might love him now with his new attitude, and they can accept the character growth from what he originally was to what he is now.
And I would say that, like, the Young Justice cartoon, which I only watched a couple episodes, was very that same thing, where a transition of characters, and different
Right.
going into it.
Right.
Young Justice was really good, and I highly recommend you go catch up on it.
Yeah.
It was very good. Yes. The Shazam episode is particularly good where, who was it? Calabac cast that spell where it divides the world. You have kids in one realm and adults in the other. And so Billy is the only one who can traverse between the two and coordinate the heroes to fight. That was such a good episode.
Right, it really was.
I have to. I need to watch it. A lot of it's because just with everything with work and everything going on, I only get time to really watch a little bit, and especially now that I'm doing all this, it's like I get time to do some things. But I'm trying to be creative because I let my creative itch go a long time ago.
Right. I do think that a lot of the different stories that we could tell have been out there already. I can't say all the stories. There might be something completely new that comes up that we haven't even thought about yet. But I do think that a lot of stories are very similar in certain aspects. Sweet Tooth is really, really similar to The Threat. A disease wiped out mankind, and in some way, shape, or form, it started mutating people. Now, in Sweet Tooth, it just happens to be all the infants that were born at that particular time became animal kids. And in The Threat, it's, the cure is actually what ends up causing people to mutate, and it mutates them in a different way than Sweet Tooth does. And then both stories are, one takes place in a completely dystopian kind of future where there are no cities, there's no government form, it's all kind of militias and anarchy out there. But in The Threat, you've got certain pockets of areas where there are cities that still survive and flourish in the new governments that have been set up throughout the world. And there are plenty of other stories out there where some kind of disease wipes out mankind and something happens after that. So all those stories have been told. It's the spin that we put on them that makes them all different. I was going to say that, the superhero introductions, for example, the Iron Man was almost identical to the way that he was introduced in the comics. The only difference is they really brought it up into the modern age. If you boil both of those stories down to what their basics are, both of them are identical. Captain America, exactly the same way. The only difference is that instead of him waking up in the 60s, he woke up in the, 20,000, 2000, whatever it was. Thor's obviously a little bit different because we don't really see Donald Blake, although he does get banished to Earth, et cetera, et cetera. But he's not banished to Earth anywhere near as long as he was in the comics.
Thor's more of a physical entity, and instead of being a god who possesses a body of someone who has the hammer.
Right. Carol Danvers obviously is a little bit of a takeaway from that. She's not really designed. Her origin really isn't all that similar to Carol Danvers from the comics, from my understanding of it. Obviously, Captain Marvel, really different in the comic versus the MCU. And I do think that they could have played a little bit of homage to the original Captain Marvel. They could have made Captain Marvel a female and shown her in her costume at some point, just really quick. I was okay with them gender bending him, but I would have really preferred the passing of the torch that we've been talking about. Like, we really should have been able to see this character that's been around for years and years and years and years, passing it on to somebody new.
Yeah, I've actually got a good point to jump to, because it kind of goes back to what you were saying at the beginning, Vince, where it feels like, people might be getting more nostalgic with everything going on with the pandemic. But to be honest, it started way before that. I mean, we've had this whole 80s pastiche for film for over a decade, it feels like now, right?
Music, aesthetic, the visual art style.
Everything about it, right? Everything is calling back to the 80s. But it's funny because you go to the 80s and they're calling back to the 60s, right? And I had this revelation the other day. I say the other day, it's been a while. So I went out and I bought a collection of a bunch of Alfred Hitchcock films. And I decided to sit down. I was going to show my son Psycho, right? And I was showing him Psycho. And as we were watching it, he kind of was making a little, he knows with me, unless it's a B movie and we're making our own fun with it. If it's a good movie, we're quiet, we watch all that stuff. If it's a B movie, we talk shit, we make fun, because then it makes the movie more fun, right? So in Psycho, at one point, he kind of he made a comment at one point. He's like, "Oh wow, like what's going to happen to this lady? Is like the mom crazy?" And it hit me. He had no knowledge of Psycho, none whatsoever. Right. And I thought back to my childhood, and for my childhood, I knew Psycho before I ever saw the movie, because it was parodied to death in cartoons, in TV shows, in everything.
Right.
Everything pointed back to the shower scene in Psycho, pointed back to the big revelation of the mom is dead and he's got that dual personality and talking that whole thing. And it hit me. Wow. Yeah, sorry guys.
We're sorry, spoiler alert.
I mean, honestly, if you haven't seen it by now, you're probably never going to see it. So who cares? Yeah, but
if you haven't seen the original or the horrible Vince Vaughn remake or any other version of it, then yeah, you're a little sorry. But yeah, it was just one of those things that really hit me in that moment of, man, he had no clue. He had no idea going into this. And it made me kind of start to, whenever I was thinking about this topic, it got me thinking more and more about how not only our nostalgia, but the nostalgia of the people who create the things that are building our nostalgia, right, influences us, right? It's because for me, Psycho isn't my point of reference anymore. Now my point of reference is Tiny Toons doing a parody of Psycho, or whatever TV show doing a parody of Psycho. That's my beginning point, and it goes back to what I was saying of the canon has changed, right? People haven't read Heinlein as much anymore. Asimov's kind of out of the loop, not entirely, but just enough to where they're far enough away that now it's the people inspired by those are inspiring the people now, right? And that's where it's kind of a cool transition to kind of consider and see of, man. And that's where I think a lot of these kind of differences of what we expect as compared to what the new generation is willing to expect is seeing. It's like the people that complained about the Blob remake.
I love that.
And how, it was nothing like the Steve McQueen deal and all that stuff, right? But to us, that's a horror movie classic.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so it's just kind of cool. It's a cool and frustrating and just interesting concept to kind of roll around in the mind of, man, that's what we're seeing. The people that are making stuff now are the people who were influenced by the 80s. So now they're infusing 80s into what they're making now, but it's different, right? It's different enough to where it's something new than what it was before. We still want it to be what it was before because that's what we enjoy, but it's just kind of interesting to see that evolution now that I'm getting older, right?
Right. Something else, kind of, sorry, Vince, if you were going to make another point, but something else that I just kind of thought of is that nostalgia is really a gut punch sometimes. We all remember loving Transformers, the TV show Mask, He-Man, but I cannot stand to watch those old cartoons now. They are horrible. I do not have any clue as to why we liked those shows when we were kids, but I recall loving every minute sitting down in front of the TV and watching those. I haven't really tried to watch Robotech, but I bet I couldn't watch Robotech either. And I love that show. Those shows are awesome, but I just can't get into them. And then, of course, kind of going back to what we were talking about now, I can't watch any of the new stuff either. Any of the new Transformers animated stuff. I tried to watch that MTV He-Man series when it came out, 10, 15 years ago now?
Oh, there was a Cartoon Network, was the 2002 He-Man retelling, and it was the more modern art. Actually had better storytelling than the original show.
Yeah.
They had that. Well, remember, it's funny because we had He-Man, and then they did the New Adventures of He-Man, where he was more traveling in space, which me and my dad enjoyed, but it wasn't well received. But you know, the funny thing is, I can't watch He-Man at all. I mean, I can watch the 2000 stuff. I'm waiting for the new one that Kevin Smith's doing, even though I'm wary about some of the decisions and things he's doing for it. I don't know what he's going to do.
Right.
But that old cartoon, I tried to watch it with Edward to see if he would get into it, like when he was like 5, and I was like, I can't even watch this. This is so bad. But
Right.
There's certain things out there that can be timeless, and it just depends on what your perspective are. You know,
Right.
You growing up, you were older than I was whenever Transformers came out. Same thing with G.I. Joe. So yeah, some of the stories there were some good stories. There's good episodes, but some of that earlier stuff wasn't that great. But like if you watch the very first 3 episodes, the premiere for Transformers, it still has a really good story. But then there's like some goofy stuff here and there, or there's just bad production goof offs or mess ups that they have.
Where did Optimus Prime's trailer go when he transformed?
Yeah, it transformed into it just popped into another reality.
This even kind of rolls over to toys. Like I cannot, if I could find an original looking version of Optimus Prime, but especially Jazz, if I could find a real authentic version of Jazz, I would probably buy that. But I can't buy any of the new, what I would consider junk that's out there now. And of course, Vince is going to pull one down. A Megatron.
This right here, hopefully it'll stay good. This Megatron is cartoon accurate.
There you go.
And this right here, this is my memories. This is what he looked like in the cartoon, and this is what I always thought he looked like, regardless of. Come on, stay. Just
move him in front of your face, Vince.
Yeah, hold on.
No, over to move him closer to your right hand. There you go.
So this figure right here is exactly what the cartoon was.
Right.
And of course, this character was very dark, especially in the comic. I'm sorry, but he would destroy humans. He wouldn't be like, I'm going to plead with you. No, you're going to die. But these figures, this is what I like this stuff because this gravitates to what I saw when I was a kid. And it's funny, like when you play a video game, like on the PlayStation or some of that first polygon stuff, it looks bad, but
oh my God, it's horrible.
You can go back and play the remakes of it. And it's like, oh man, this looks what it looked like when I played it back in the day, even though it looked bad when we were playing it, because it just looked, the whole 2D. Graphics.
I can't play those games. If they're not modern games, I can't go back. I can't go back and play Mario Kart. I just can't do it. I don't like those. But the nostalgia, I loved playing them back when they were new. The toys, back to that, Target has brand new He-Man figures, and they look very, very similar to the old figures.
Yeah.
To have more posing actions that you can do with them. You can move their hands, stuff like that now. But I wanted to buy them. There was a He-Man. There was a Skeletor. They had both Panther and oh crud, what was He-Man's cat's name?
Cringer, but
Cringer. They had them. They had the little front half of that tank thing that they had that came off and flew, the little sky skiff thing. They had a bunch of them, and I had them all in my cart ready to take them home. And then I started looking at them, and they look just a little bit different than the originals. And I was like, I can't do it. I just can't do it. I put them all back. I had probably $150 worth of action figures in my, which is probably nothing in comparison to what other people spend, but that was a lot for me. So
and the funny thing too is like you and then you always get on to me and Dad about us collecting and stuff. Now I put mine out, and I understand my dad just doesn't have. He has the space. He just doesn't have anything set up right, and it's hard for him now because he's by himself. So especially with everything going on. So I understand. And Amber's going to be going up there at some point with Brock to help him pull out that carpet. Once he can get that carpet pulled out and put wood in, he's going to start doing stuff around the rooms to actually start displaying stuff. But it's just like he needs to. I know it's just hard for him. But
he just needs to pay somebody else to do it.
I know we do.
Instead of doing it himself, he just needs to pay somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
And I hope this stays in the video so that he hears it.
So here, but I love NECA because NECA makes these great stuff, but they don't make enough of it for people to be able to buy it. But
Right.
Come on.
Nope.
Come on.
No. We kind of got it, Vince. You got to put it right in the middle, Vince.
It's like, how can I have a figure that's freaking like Keith David? I mean, like, as a character. Oh, come on. That's whatever.
They live Keith David figure. We got you.
And it's like they just made McCready look fantastic. And it's like, I want them to make the whole crew. That'd be great. Have Windows and Childs. And, all of them and stuff. And then you can have like the other versions of the thing that they didn't make. Like the actual one of him and the dog version in the kennel. Or what was the other one they didn't do? Bennings, when he's all when they burn him out in the snow. They could make all these other figures and stuff, but they just didn't do it. But they've only made like Blair Monster. Was it Norris when he chest part, and then they did the spider head. But that was McFarlane when he was doing them. So I'm hoping NECA will get the license to do the rest of them. But it'd be cool because it's like, they did the Aliens figures that are the Alien. They did Aliens too, but the Alien figures, my dad has the whole crew. It's really cool. You could just have them all set up and, have a backdrop, and you have just like this nice nostalgia thing of something that you enjoyed growing up. That's such a big part of your life. And that's why I collect. I mean, of course it's a window into my past, but and it'll be something that Edward will have whenever I die. He can either keep it and go, hey, this is my memories of my dad and when I spent together, or he can sell it, and he'll be able to do whatever he wants with it.
Yeah. See, where I guess I'm super blessed is that I'm a little bit younger than all you other guys. So whenever I was coming up, the cartoons that I was mainly focused on are over here with the Timverse animated series, which I don't know if y'all know this, but they've aged pretty well.
Yes, they have.
I will to this day still go in and pop in and watch Feet of Clay Part 1 and 2, Heart of Ice, all that stuff, man.
What are these from? I didn't hear what the name of the.
Oh, it's the Batman animated series.
Bruce Timm, like Batman the animated series.
Batman the animated series.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that goes back again to that also helps solidify some of my love of Superman, right? Batman the animated series, Superman the animated series, the Justice League series. Whenever he went and picked up Green Lantern was great. Static Shock was good, although I don't think Static Shock was initially Timverse. I think that was
it wasn't towards Unlimited. It wasn't towards Unlimited. They started putting him in that. I think for maybe one or two episodes. I think
Justice League, but I don't think it was originally part of the Timverse. It was. Yeah, whenever Justice League started coming in, that's whenever they reintroduced Static into that world. But
right.
Batman Beyond, so much of that series,
Batman Beyond is great. Yeah,
established. Harley Quinn came from that TV show, right? Like Mr. Freeze is no longer Mr. Zero because of that TV show. That's where it came from. That's where it got established from. So I'm sorry to hear that He-Man sucks, but I didn't watch it. I watched those, so I'm good. Now, the one show that I did try to rewatch at one point, I've got it, I think, sitting over this shoulder over here, is Gargoyles, right? Gargoyles trying to take off the success of Batman the animated series, and it's so funny to see. The first couple episodes are great, setting up the Gargoyles, setting up their history, all that stuff, and then a couple episodes in, all of a sudden, they do that Disney thing where they have obligatory PSA episode, right? Of, hey, everybody, you need to obey traffic signals. And the way they're going to do it is the Gargoyles are going to get on a motorcycle and get in a car wreck, or the fat one's going to touch a gun and it's going to go off and shoot somebody. It's the obligatory, we need to go through and explain to children and kids about how guns require safety, which they absolutely do. But it's such a weird episode to watch. After
they should have just done it like G.I. Joe did and have this PSA at the end.
Yeah, no, they dedicated entire episodes
And knowing
to it,
is
and I
half
don't
the
remember.
battle.
Yeah,
Knowing is half the
and what
battle.
was so weird rewatching that series, I didn't remember those episodes at all. I remember the beginning. I remembered all the epic fights, all the big stuff, and then all of a sudden I'm sitting there watching like, wait, this is just a GI Joe. I'm waiting for it to end. No, this is a full episode. I don't remember this at all, and for good reason because it's boring. But
Yeah.
it has a message to it, I guess. It's just kind of awkward, but yeah.
But yeah, I think cartoons is a good thing. Even like TV shows that we used to watch. You think about like Miami Vice. Was one of my favorites and stuff. And it got actually really good, true to to the source material kind of movie. Even though I felt like some of the decisions, even though it was directed by Michael Mann, of like having Tubbs have not Tubbs, but Crockett have the love interest instead of Tubbs, because Tubbs was usually the one that always had problems with the girl that was connected to whatever case they were dealing with. But yeah, that's sometimes just one of those things where you kind of play it on its head. People that know the source material get that kind of play. But then you look at like 21 Jump Street, where that show was really kind of was more mature than it was a comedy. They had
Right.
comedic elements in it, but and then you look
Hey.
at
Those movies were hilarious.
they may be hilarious, but they weren't true to the source material. And then on top of that, was hilarious was the fact, and it kind of upset me, was the fact that both Johnny Depp and
they got killed.
Yeah, they got killed at the end. That was like
that was hilarious.
I know it's funny, but
that was just freaking hilarious.
But it connects to the original series, so it's like
right.
So this is the fitting in all the stuff that tragedy they went through and everything. They end up dying. They get gunned down. But but it's funny because it happens with everything. As we grow up, we watch things that we enjoy, and sometimes we get fascinated with stuff and we gravitate it, and it may linger in us for a long time. So it's hard to sometimes let that nostalgia not take over you and ruin you from liking something.
I've got a perfect example of exactly what we're talking about. 2 TV shows, MacGyver and Walker, Texas Ranger. Those the originals, obviously everybody loves them. They're just fanatics about them. The new ones are a lot different though, and it's because of the storytelling. Back then, in the 80s and 90s, the whole point of a TV show was a single episode. There was not a lot of overarching pieces that joined those episodes from one episode to the next. Whereas in the new stuff, in a lot of new shows, the entire season is an arc, like a comic book arc, 5, 6 issues, where we're talking an entire season now. Now, some of them I think have cut it down to where it's half the season and then the second half is a different arc. But the main villain of those shows is the main villain for the entire season of a show now. And so they've got to fill character building into these shows where they didn't really have to do a lot of character building back then. They introduced the main character, which everybody knew from the previous episodes, and all the other main characters. They introduced a bad guy. The main characters beat the bad guy by the end of it, and that was it. Maybe every once in a while that bad guy came back, but it really wasn't a consistent arc through the season.
So one complaint. So I had a very long discussion with a work buddy of mine back when the first season of The Mandalorian came out, where my problem with it was that the structure of the show felt awkward and off to me, right? And that's kind of a show where you have an overarching villain for the season. You have the first 3 episodes, if I recall, on Tatooine or wherever the desert planet he starts off out at, and it's dealing with him and Baby Yoda, and then he goes off planet, right? And then it becomes almost monster of the week. But
right,
they kind of hinted in about the little things about, oh yeah, well, he's still got Baby Yoda, he's still got to deal with that. And so that's where I thought the show was actually going to take off and turn into Supernatural or something like that, where it was going to be just kind of him dealing with things every new episode, and then maybe at the end of the season they would have something that would tie it back to, you know, the overall villain plot. And it kind of did that, but the way it happened, right? It was like the first episode after he left off the planet was the obligatory Seven Samurai style episode, and it ended with Baby Yoda almost getting killed, him killing the assassin. And you would think that someone getting that close is what would trigger him. Okay, I need to go back and deal with this. And then every episode after that was just kind of tangentially related. Hey, someone started to kind of learn about who Baby Yoda was and how important it was and the bounty on it and all that stuff. It's like I would have kind of restructured it a little bit to put that inciting event at the end, so that would lead him back. But you're right. It's you do have those old shows where, but I mean, the majority of them were police procedurals, right? So it's a little bit easier to get away with that. You just have new mob boss, new villain, new they're having to deal with a drug runner on this new place and all that. And I do kind of miss that, right? I do really miss those shows where you can just walk into it, turn off your brain, and get into it. But the landscape has changed now, right? It's not everybody watching something new each week to talk about at the water cooler on Monday. It's binge the whole season
in one
over
night.
the weekend so that we can all sit down and talk about it the next day, right? And there's some of the companies that are trying to space it out now and kind of go back to that old format a little bit. But when you can sit there and watch everything all at one time, I guess it's a little jarring for some folks. They expect the continuation of the story through each. And it's the delivery of the story has kind of changed the means of telling it.
Right. Sabrina the Teenage Witch is a kind of another perfect example. You know, the Netflix show did what with the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
Yes.
And you know, the original was just a sitcom that came on every week, and every week was a different thing going on. Whereas again, just like Supernatural is a kind of a good example where there's typically a main villain for the entire season, and then they go on little adventures, and there are pieces in each episode that connect back to that main villain. And I do think that it's much better storytelling. From a storytelling aspect, it's much better now than it used to be. You know, I don't know, it just feels like you're more involved in an entire situation than you are with just one thing going on this week and something else going on next week. At least there's a joining of all those episodes together. You know,
and so like to piggyback off of what David and you guys are talking about, like for like the Mandalorian, you know, I kind of felt it like it was a return back to form as far as like what it was for me and Mark growing up reading. I don't know if you read a lot of the books or anything, but I know we role played, so it felt like I was in one of our sessions. It was like, you know, and it also gave off this whole Western feel. That was kind of like, it was more like the Wild West, the outer rim of the galaxy in Star Wars. You know, the dark seated area with, you know, the crime and the villainy and things that are not connected to the you know, the Empire. And it was also trying to reconnect Star Wars more to the Legends content or the EU back in the day than connecting it to what had been done that, you know, wasn't doing well. And that's why, you know, when season 2 happened, there was a lot more callbacks, there was a lot more you know, I felt that there was a lot more like at stake, because now we know that there's this villain that's going after the characters, which is like, it kind of went through this transition of having a kind of the sitcom-esque feel, the one and done monster of the week, but in a Western style, to, oh no, the Empire is looking for Grogu. You know, what do we need to do to get him away from this and get him to the people that he needs? and I have high hopes for what they're going to do with the next stuff. But you think about like, because Stargate had that feel. And it's funny because like me and Mark loved the original movie Stargate, and then it was hard for me to get into the TV series because it's like I like Kurt Russell. I want Kurt Russell to be,
Right.
you know.
I really enjoyed the TV show. I thought that they did a lot of good stuff throughout the series. I think that there was some crap they threw in there also, but I really did like the series. I liked what they did with it.
And Atlantis,
it was fun to go, adventuring on these other places. The special effects were crap, but the stories weren't bad. I wouldn't rank it up there with one of the best series I've ever watched, of course, but it was pretty good. Something else I was going to say. Okay, you guys go ahead.
And I'll add one more thing too. I thought that when I first watched The Mandalorian, it reminded me of Lone Wolf and Cub, and where it was a Ronin samurai that was protecting his child, or in a child that he had kind of adopted or took in. And it's funny how this goes back into what we've kind of been discussing, is like the differences in Western storytelling and Eastern storytelling. And for us, we're more sitcom. We're now adopting more Eastern storytelling with Japan and how they tell their mangas and everything. Because even though they may have these one and done moments, it all still connects. It still has this overarching story that it deep roots everything. Because even like our comics, unless there was like a big annual or a big crossover, usually it was just a one and done. It wasn't until towards later on that more things kind of got really deep about what they were doing.
Right. And most story arcs are what, 3 to 5 issues each, and then they move on to something else. Yeah.
Or 12, like the Batman with the long
12.
Yeah, with the long Halloween.
Right.
We're getting into a point to where hopefully we'll be able to define who we are as far as our storytelling again, because we used to be the what people gravitated towards. They wanted to model what they were doing off of what we were doing, because we were the innovators. And now it's like we're now modeling our stuff off of other people that are becoming the better storytellers.
Right. One of the things I love about The Mandalorian and shows, and I love the Easter eggs that they put in them, or the callbacks to the original stuff, or other things like Osaka. That's her name, right? Osaka Tano. Ahsoka. Yeah. Ahsoka. I love the fact that she was in The Mandalorian. Like, just seeing her for one episode, and then Boba Fett, perfect example. Real callback to the original stuff. I know that there's a lot of people that hate the fact that they're still using old characters. I know that there are newer fans that hated the Han Solo movie just because it was about Han Solo and the old stuff again, and let's move on to new stuff and that sort of thing. And that's kind of where we get back to nostalgia. It's nice that The Mandalorian was able to make callbacks to old stuff that Luke Skywalker showing up in it at the end there.
That was I never thought that I'd get to see Luke and his prime again, ever.
Right.
Other than reading the original books.
The only thing about that is that that kind of makes me wonder about the timelines, because I thought that this was like way later than it apparently is.
It takes place like 5 years after the 5 or 6 years after the battle
return
of Endor. Yeah. Okay. So at this time, you have if it's following EU stuff, Leia is probably pregnant with the twins at this moment, if they're moving towards what they're trying to do. So the biggest thing that they introduced in and this needs to be a Star Wars topic on its own, a whole episode, but they introduced in Rebels the
Blacksaber,
the wills, those portals. And then if you look at the Ahsoka for the TV show, that has that around her. So here's the thing. you have a way to retcon everything. You could literally go back to what they're doing. And I think that's what they're going to do, because why would you have this here, that symbol of the portal for time travel, basically in this, you can literally have it to where you stop some event that happens. And even if it's Grogu being the prime example of what stops, the First Order from happening, Snoke from happening, all this other, the Rey situation with her being a clone of the Emperor, all this other stuff. There's a lot of opportunities for things. And I know that they just casted, what's her name from, Doctor Who, and to play Mara Jade, which I think she's going to be great. She's not the person I would have cast for her. I think that the actress that was from Game of Thrones and The Last Witch Hunter, the redhead, I can't remember her name. She was the one I always tell you know nothing, Jon Snow.
Oh yeah, okay.
She's perfect. If you read the books and stuff about Mara Jade, she's perfect. I think she can pull off the perfect attitude. She has the perfect look, and I think she'd be a good contrast to Sebastian Stan being Luke. So
that's if Sebastian. That's
I
if
know
we ever even see that stuff
because of what's going on.
Honestly, I don't expect that we're ever going to go back that far. I don't think that they're going to go back and try to retcon the last three so that we can see those. I just don't see it happening. It's, maybe, but I honestly think that the generations that are out here now, a lot more fans of Star Wars are getting tired of Luke, Leia, Han, and Chewbacca, R2.
Well, at least the new fans. I think the new fans. I don't think any of the legacy fans are tired of it.
Yeah, we'd love it, but again, we're not the focus audience.
No, yeah, and exactly. And that goes back to what Andrew said. So sadly, some of this stuff is just not made for us. But then that's sad, because one of the
I was going to say, but it goes back to, again, what we've been saying of what frustrated and what angered fans about the sequel trilogy so bad was the handling of those legacy characters, right? Like, you could have had Finn and Poe and Rey take on those mantles and become the new, trilogy set,
the new icons. I mean, the next
Star
legacy.
Wars. You could have done that, but they were too busy trying to tear down. I mean, Harrison Ford just wanted Han to die after all this time. He wanted to be done with that character. So that was what it was. But like Jedi just, it messed with so much with the characters and just stripped them down so bad. And it's like, you can change the characters, right? You could make Luke a angry, bitter old man for whatever reason, but the way they did it just felt off, and it
undermined the character. I mean, it in his legacy.
And to be completely honest, we've seen plenty of media for Star Wars at this point that we could have literally never seen Han or Luke and Leia just be around in the command center a couple of times, and then we never see her again. The entire three episodes could have been about Rey, Poe, and Finn.
Yeah, about the legacy. They had the legends of the original Republic, and the sad thing too is we didn't have to have the Empire back again. We didn't have to have stormtroopers back again. We could have had a whole new threat.
But it was JJ, and JJ, he does is he takes and puts things in, takes things out of the recycling bin, paints it up a little bit prettier, puts some lens flares on it, and puts it back up on the screen. And it feels good and it tastes good as it's going down that first time, and then you think back to it and you're like, that's the exact same thing that I've seen before. And
And just like Rogue Squadron and all these other shows that we've seen, the Bad Batch is a perfect example. People love the Bad Batch because of the Clone Wars, and those characters don't have anything to do with Luke, Leia, Han, Chewbacca, or any of those old people. Rogue Squadron, another good example. While people might not like the movie as a whole, I do think that I personally found that it was a really good story. I loved it. It was great. And I think that they don't even have to do anything
I
that's
mean,
a
Rogue One,
galactic threat at this point. They
Rogue
could
One, yeah, and then
Rogue One, yeah, that's what
yeah,
I meant. But I think that I don't. So two things. Number one, I don't think that the new three new movies had to be about Luke, Leia. They didn't
no,
have to be that involved. They're really old at this point. Um, and they could have just retired. Like literally, you could have shown them sitting around in a cabana and never shown them again. But
well,
I
there was
also don't think that we had to have a galactic threat. I think it could
no,
have been these three
just a
people,
space adventure, you
right?
know. Um,
Um, something on a planet happens.
yeah,
They could like the Han Solo movie. That wasn't about a galactic threat, really. It was about bounty hunter threats and
smuggling and
smuggling and
yeah,
criminal activity, and it was very small in comparison to the Star Wars trilogy movies.
yeah. And the sad thing too is that you have this opportunity to that they could have done. So like the last book of the EU was called The Crucible, and it has Han, Leia. I mean, well, it has the three, and it has their grandkids. I mean, their kids and their grandkids their kids being called to this space station out in like the far reaches of the galaxy that just is emanating dark energy. And they go through this whole process, and then they like, look, we're going to stay here. And they let Jaina Solo and all Ben Skywalker and a couple other characters that are with them in this whole journey take up the mantle. Like, we're going to go off on this. We're going to go spend our last days exploring what this ship is and doing things. And they left it at that. And that was the end of it. You could have done that whole handoff, and you could have had these new characters. But you could have had,
But I don't even think you had to do that. Honestly, I think that the callback to having one, maybe two of the old characters would have been enough. I think everybody would have loved if it was just R2 and R2, C3PO, and Chewbacca. We literally didn't need the other three characters.
Yeah.
Sure, it was nostalgic. It was kind of awesome seeing them on screen again, but Star Wars doesn't necessarily. The universe at this point is bigger than just those three characters.
Those three characters.
Yeah.
Even though the story was always about the Skywalker saga, but yes, at this point now it can be about anything, because
right.
We don't know what they're going to do, and they could have done so much. But the problem is they didn't have a Bible. They didn't have a plan, a roadmap for what they wanted to do, an overarching story.
Right.
It's one thing when Lucas was doing that back in the day when he made the first three movies, episode 4, 5, and 6, because it was the first time it was being done. But everything was very cohesive and it worked. It flowed. It didn't there was no point in either one of those trilogies that you were pulled out of the moment of what was going on, even with the Ewok dance scene at the end. With the original.
Maybe finding out that Luke and Leia were related after seeing them kiss. That pulled you out just a little bit.
Yeah.
It probably helped create a certain subgenre on a certain hub. But yeah, I mean, and it really just goes back to having good storytelling, right? Like one of my biggest frustrations with Last Jedi was the fact that they didn't use Finn in any kind of decent. He was this weird sub-character. Like, he had such an interesting setup. There was such an interesting concept behind this character, and then he just kind of became comic relief boy, chasing behind Rey and then chasing behind Rose.
Yeah. The hardest thing about that,
and then his heroic moment comes up, which was going to be it was going to be self-sacrifice, right? And he was going to be dead, but you had this moment that he was finally going to have, and then he gets kicked out of it. It's like, okay, so he's there for the next movie. That's good. Like, I'm glad he didn't die, but that was the first time it felt like he was actually going to be doing something of his own will and volition in that movie, and then it got stolen from him. I was just like, this is and that was the frustrating part, is that
Well, and it was the same. It was
they just wouldn't let those characters breathe. They
Well,
didn't give
yeah.
they didn't give Poe a chance to really. That was one of the best parts of Force Awakens, was when Poe shows up. You see him flying and blows the TIE fighters out of the sky. Right, one of the most memorable moments from Force Awakens was when
him taking out the Starkiller.
Finn throws down to fight with that one stormtrooper with the crazy ass vibro baton or whatever the hell it was. But it was, you had character moments for them. You had these epic scenes where they filled the screen, and that's what they became. Finn, even though he shouldn't have been able really to go toe to toe with Kylo at that point, even though he was injured and all that crap, but still, you had that moment.
But you saw his character
moments
at that moment. You saw that
Right.
character, what the potential of what he could be,
Right.
And and the thing is like subverting the whole thing of like, maybe he's not the Jedi, it's Rey. They could have both been force sensitive. You don't have to have one person be the Jedi.
Right. It doesn't have to be just the lineage of Luke Skywalker and the Emperor.
Yeah.
There was no need for Rey to be a bloodline. I didn't care if Rey was a Kenobi or whatever. It was just the fact that the way that they showed, oh, she's a nobody, right? Luke sitting there saying, oh, hey, here's this cave don't go down there. And in your mind, you're thinking back to whenever he went off into the woods and fought Vader, which turned out to be himself and all the other stuff.
In the cave.
And instead, in the cave, sorry. And instead, we just get Rey standing with an infinite versions of herself, snapping her fingers, and then the scene ends.
Yeah, I always thought that
stupid.
I always thought that impression was the fact that was showing that she's a clone, a multiple clone, because there's multiple versions of herself.
Yeah, but that wasn't in Johnson's mind at that point.
Exactly. There was no like cohesiveness to it. I felt like the Last Jedi was freaking like, Indians circling the wagons, because it's like, this is just giant chase that are just going through space because they're running out of fuel, and it was just badly written. I mean, even like they destroyed like the physics within the world. It's like, oh, we're just gonna drop bombs in the middle of space like it's freaking on gravity. I mean, I just
look.
So
it's one thing that
there's some silly bullshit in Star Wars. All right.
Like, I mean, I could. Yeah. First off, you could have done it.
You can explain that crap away. I didn't. When they did that, I'm like, whatever, it's fine. I wasn't even thinking about the fact that, oh, there's gravity. It's like, in my mind, whatever, technology bullshit, sci-fi bullshit, whatever. Move along.
Maybe the ships had a gravitational pull because they were big enough.
There you go.
Again, this is what I was thinking.
Sci-fi bullshit.
Here's how you make it work, right? So you have that vacuum of oxygen in that area, right? And it would have been better that, Rose's sister, like because there's oxygen for them to breathe in the container, right? So the vacuum that instantly comes when you open it up is what pushes everything out, which is the momentum that pushes it down on the thing.
Oh, that makes sense.
Which would have been hold on,
sci-fi bullshit. Sci-fi bullshit.
But which would have been great for the fact. But that would have been great for the fact of like, instead of Rose's sister dying because the ship explodes, she dies because she loses oxygen. She knows it's a moment where she's going to sacrifice her life. It's a little bit more hard on the audience to take that in than like, oh, she did this, and then, oh wow, they miraculously did it somehow. I mean, there's just like tons of stuff that was wrong with that movie. I mean, to undermine Poe and all the actions he did just so they can go, oh, it's a power thing. Oh, he's doing this because she's to make him like a dumb subordinate was stupid.
And then that character dies like that.
Yeah.
We need to save all this for a Star Wars episode.
Okay. And I'll leave this at this. That should have been Admiral Akbar. Admiral Akbar should have been the one that said, I'm going to do this, and let him die a hero. Then going.
I actually, we can get more in depth in this. I actually think their big send off, right? I actually thought that should have been Leia. Like the way that movie was going, the way it was setting up, I'm like, that should have been Leia. That would have been her setting up that way. I can't even remember her name because she was so pointless in that movie. General Purple Hair Lady. That would have been, because then we would have had a movie to actually show her leading and being consistent and intelligent and actually proving that she was this great general. Instead, she just does her holdo. That's what it was.
Yeah,
she does her holdo maneuver and blows up and dies. Now I don't care anymore. It's like Phasma. Oh, look at the platinum stormtrooper, and then she gets trash compacted, and I don't care anymore. Oh,
she's the silver Boba Fett.
She's dead, and I don't care anymore. It's like I didn't give a shit about that character at all.
She's the silver Boba Fett. But all right, so let's start wrapping this up because I know that it's getting late, and there's been a lot of good topics on the matter. So we hope you enjoyed the conversation for this episode. If you have, things that you have nostalgic goggles for, let us know. What are things that you've watched that you find hard to because your childhood says this isn't right, or there's things that you've watched that you've been able to move past it, or actually made it better for you to enjoy what you're watching. But until then, have a good one. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and leave us a topic down below of what you want us to talk about next. Until then, have a good one.
See you, everybody.